select Arcane. Now that it's January, we're moving right into NaMoPaiMo season. And veterans know we start prepping in January. But for the uninitiated, prepping can be very daunting. So this video is for the brand new model horse customizer. Firstly, if you have a resin in your possession that you want to prep, go here. I've already made a video on how to prep a resin properly. Prepping is the process of getting a model ready for repainting. This step needs to be done to fix any flaws and to prepare it for new paint. Removing the factory paint is not required for customizing Breyers. If you show model horses or sell your work, a well-prepped model will make or break your artwork. Prepping could arguably be the most important part of model horse customizing. WGC Mark of Charm is going to be the victim today. And don't feel bad, he has tons of flaws. He has some chipped paint, tons of overspray, his eyeballs are 2 black dots with some white on them, and he has a lot of shiny marks. So other than a shelf model, he's not a very useful guy. But he's about to have a new lease on life. All you're going to need to prep your Breyer are some diamond-coated files that you can get from Amazon, an X-Acto knife, which is more optional than anything, 180 grit sandpaper or sponge, and primer, which we'll go into later. Don't look so scared, Charm. You're gonna look great at the end. Starting with the file, you're looking for any obvious seams. Charm here is a newer model, so he doesn't have as many pronounced seams. Breyer's done really well in limiting those. But because he's factory made, there's going to be seams either way. Breyer plastic is really durable, so go at it. File those seams down to the best of your abilities. These are usually located around the back, between the legs, ears, face, neck, and especially hidden in the tail. This is probably a good time to mention the hole in the face. This is an air hole. This prevents the plastic from expanding over a long period of time, especially in warm weather. Before a certain point in Breyer's history, model horses were not made with this hole, and they would blow up like balloons, called bloaties. Noticing that that's undesirable to happen to your pony, they started adding these holes, usually in the mouth, sometimes somewhere else. If you do want to get rid of the hole, you can fill it, and we'll discuss that in a moment, but you will have to add that hole later on. At least it'll be somewhere else. A hand drill like this is what you would need to make a new hole somewhere else to replace the mouth hole. Once you feel that you have gone over all of the obvious seams, as much as you can see anyways, go in with your sandpaper. I prefer the sponge because you can squish it up and get into those hard to reach areas. Sand all of those rough areas that you went over with the file. This is going to remove any scratches. This is also great for removing raised paint or any other rough areas. Be really thorough. Prepping is like 98% sanding. And feel free to go back in with the file at any time and swap back and forth between the file and the sandpaper. Alright, good enough for now. Let's go give him a bath. Remember when washing your Breyer to plug that hole. If water gets in, it can sit inside the pony and mold can grow. Use anti-grease dish soap like Dawn or Sunlight to wash the pony, and don't use anything abrasive, but I do like using a toothbrush to get into all those hard to reach areas. Make sure your water isn't too hot, otherwise it can warp the plastic if you push too hard. When you're all done washing and rinsing, leave them to dry on a paper towel or a dish towel and let air dry for a few hours. Absolutely do not towel dry, otherwise that can leave lint and streaks. Now while that pony dries, let's talk primer. Back during the pandemic in 2020, I used to write a blog called The Full Watch. In it, I offered multiple customizing tips and how-to guides. And primer was a subject I was very passionate about. And my opinion about the ranking has not changed in over 5 years, so let me do a quick summary. The moral of the story is that some primers really are better than others, especially depending on where you live. If you live in a high humidity area like I do, some primers can be affected by this and not be as durable. You want to make sure you're choosing a primer suitable for your needs. Secondly, you want to match the primer to your activity. For For example, a primer with full coverage is great for a big Breyer, but is terrible for a micro mini that'll hide all of its small details. And I do recognize I need to do a primer and sealant product review video, so I will get right on that. But in the case for this video, my favorite primer is Duplicolor Sandable Primer, which comes in a variety of different colors, never hides any detail, has very low drying time, is safe in high humidity, like where I live, and is non-reactive to any products that I use, like pastels or oils or acrylics. I just find it a really good all-around primer. When priming your horse, spray in long, sweeping motions. Never let your primer sit in one place for too long, otherwise big globs can form. Rotate your pony like in a rotisserie chicken occasionally to make sure you have even coverage. Remember that you don't need to prime your horse in one sitting. Charm here received 3 rounds of spraying, drying indoors between coats of paint for 20 minutes at a time. This not only allowed him to stay at room temperature to allow the primer to stay stable, but it let me inspect him between coats so I could see where I still needed to prime. This is Charm's first round of primer, which means that there's going to be another round. The dark gray color I'm using is a really good intermediate because it allows me to see all the parts I've missed with sanding or filing. Rust color also works really well in this case as well, however I find it's too close to his base coat, which means that I won't be able to see nearly as much of what I have not primed already. Oh, and make sure it's not windy when you're spraying. That'll make your life a lot easier. This is Charm after 1 round of primer. And as you may or may not be able to see on camera, there's a lot of flaws left behind. Because he was so beautifully shaded, it was really hard to pick up the flaws, but while sprayed in one solid color, it's so much easier to see. This is why I love gray primer, it really shows up those details. So I simply go back in with the file and sandpaper and sand and file, sand and file, sand and file over and over and over again until I think I got it all. This is also a great time to address that hole in the mouth issue. Remember, this is completely optional and up to the customizer. I simply take my hand drill and drill into a more hidden, discreet area of the pony. Here looks pretty good. Make sure you're going all the way through to the inside of the model. Breyers are hollowed out plastic, so you should reach that relatively quickly. I like taking my diamond coated file and sticking it into the hole and making that hole wider, approximately the same width as the mouth hole. This will allow for ample airflow in the pony so it doesn't bloat. Now it's completely safe to seal the original hole. For that, I take 2-part epoxy, specifically Aves epoxy because that's just what I like using. I mix equal parts A and B together, always using gloves because you can cause an allergic reaction without, and stick it in the hole. You can just use your fingers, but if you have clay shaping tools, those are great to move the clay around and add some extra detail if needed. Epoxy is also great if you have some chips or some bigger breakage. This hoof chip is a perfect candidate for some epoxy sculpting. Using my fingers, I just squish it on with a little bit of water. For scratches and pinholes, I use the exact same technique I would use on resins. Using Bondo glazing and spot putty, I add just a little bit to the affected area. Close the cap right away because the product can dry out very quickly and also the fumes are ridiculously toxic. Make sure you're using your PPE protective equipment. Keeping a window open, using an overhead fan like I do, or just simply doing this outside is your best choice. Always, always, always use gloves for this process. Rub the spot putty into the cracks or into the pinholes and let dry for between 30 minutes to an hour. This stuff is for cars and you can find it at any automotive DIY store such as Canadian Tire if you're a fellow Canadian. After it is cured, don't forget to sand, sand, sand. Keep your mask on for this because the particles go everywhere and you don't want to breathe that stuff in. Now take Pony over to the bath again. Lather up with the same anti-grease dish soap as same as before. Use a toothbrush if you need to get into those crevices. You want to make sure you're washing all of the grease from your hands off of the model. And then, after it's dry, you're going to go prime again. I prefer to prime in gray again just to make sure that I've gotten everything and I haven't missed any spots. If you think this is overkill, yeah, it probably is, and you could skip right over to your base primer that you're going to be using instead. Saying that gray primer actually showed a bunch of areas that I missed, so I actually had to go back, re-sand, re-wash, and re-prime. Once I was happy with my final gray primer, I went over again in white. This is very much artist dependent. Depending on the materials you're going to use to paint your pony, personal technique, and direction you're going to go in, you could have stuck with the gray, or rust, or any other color of primer. Use that as the base coat, and then carry on from there. It just so happens that I prefer to start in white because it's easier for me. And I could go with either pastels, or oils, or acrylics, it doesn't really matter. So fiddle around with it if you're brand new to this, and see what you like best. And that's it! Now you have a fully primed and prepped Breyer ready for NaMoPaiMo. Before you jump into painting your pony, by the way, absolutely wait at least 24 hours before putting any paint on that pony. The brand of primer you're using may not be fully cured yet, so check your can, check the instructions, and just make sure. If you're using oils, be even safer and wait 48 hours. You don't want a chemical reaction. Prepping can be a lot of hard work, and if you haven't noticed by the lighting changes and the extra snow outside in this video, this pony took over a week. But no fear, there's a lot of model horse artists who absolutely despise prepping, me included. There are actually customizers who specialize in prepping that you can hire. Send your pony, they prep your horse for you, and they just send it directly to the artist. On the other hand, there's not many of those, and they can be really expensive. Offering really professional prepping services actually can make you a ton of money. Make a little extra income to get the horses you want, right? Now, I'm gonna need some suggestions for this pony's paint job. Maybe a dark, glittery bay, or a rich chestnut. I don't know. Put your suggestions down in the comments below. Maybe he'll be a sales piece for Breyerfest, who knows? If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. You can follow me on Instagram @SelectArcane or on Facebook by the same name. Thanks so much. Bye.